Hello. I hope you can hear me. Well, we'll give folks a few minutes. See if other people show up.
I mean, I need you to tell Zach you're gonna call him back. I need you to call Dad. Oh, sorry.
No worries. Well, hopefully a few more people will come, but that's okay if they don't. So I'm just getting to your assignment. Uh, let's see. Hmm.
Oh, and I just want to let you know that we had the same kind of issue as before with the assignment, that there wasn't an area to submit the assignment that we had last week.
There. Huh.
So on Canvas, yeah, I kept checking all throughout the week. So I completed the assignment, I think, like last Wednesday, went to submit it, but I just figured it wasn't up yet, or we might have to wait until today. So yeah, it was the same issue as before, so it wasn't officially published.
That should not be. And so, yeah, I will check that immediately. Class is over.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, no worries. I figured it was just the same issue as before, so that's why I just, all right, I'll just hold on to it to the next meeting.
My apologies.
No worries.
So, well, I guess we are about as many as we're going to be, at least for now. So, any questions or issues before we get going? Anybody? No, no, we're all good. Okay. Um, so let's see. So last time, how is it I don't have this written down? I'm so sorry. So, have any of you, let's see, gotten your assignments in, let's see here. Why is this not happening? Ah, there we go. It's still processing these. What the hell? Okay.
So, hi, how are you? This is Sarah.
I,
We talked on Wednesday, and I was able. It turns out, I had the wrong Lightroom.
right, right.
Now it's not letting me exactly upload my pictures on there, so that's something I'm working on, because I was trying to upload my pictures onto it to create folders, and it won't let me upload for some reason. So I just wanted to give you that heads up. And on Wednesday, if you have more office hours, I'll,
Yes, I do,
talk.
definitely.
So I'll try and see what I can do, but I'll let you know more on Wednesday.
Okay,
So.
sounds good. But let me get into Lightroom and into our catalog.
But at least I have the
I'm sorry. Would you repeat that?
Saying at least I'm in the correct one now.
Yes.
To just
Yeah, that was, so it finally occurred to me that
it didn't
it just is so different.
So we're good. So I see what you have, like the same thing now.
Good.
But,
well, that's good anyway, right?
yes.
Thank goodness. All right. Open, open, open. All right. So when this finally opens, then I can share the screen. It's just spinning and spinning and spinning. I don't know why. I'm sorry.
Close it and try it again if you want.
Yeah, I get. All right, here finally. It's.
We have time.
I'm so sorry. All right, out of that and back to you and redo this. Can you see Lightroom here?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, good. Okay, phew. Okay. So now does this look more familiar to you, Sarah? Does this look closer to your?
Yeah.
Okay.
This looks like exactly what I have.
Oh, good.
I just haven't to put pictures in it.
Got it. Okay, excellent. So we were starting to look at the develop module, and that, of course, is where we will be doing all of our work, all of our manipulations. So we looked at the left-hand panel, the presets, snapshots, history, collections, I believe, right? And again, with Navigator, if you don't want to see the picture, you don't have to. I like to see it. And then next to it, it gives you the, the proportions as you zoom in, and you can change those if you want. Wow, this is acting so weird. So sorry. So we then went over to the right-hand panel, and that's where all the control stuff is. So we looked at the histogram and saw that it gives our settings. There are tools here. So there are these different little sections within the module: basic, tone curve, HSL color, split toning, detail, lens corrections, transform effects, calibration. We went over, I think we went over them somewhat anyway. And I know that I went in and told you that one of the first things I do is that I go into lens corrections and I check remove chromatic aberration, so that if there are any weird things going on with the color, this takes care of a lot of them anyway. And then this is your choice, enable profile corrections. So the change is really subtle in this particular image. But when you check that, the profile of the lens that you used will come up, and Lightroom has a whole catalog, I guess, of information about different lenses and their characteristics, and it then corrects for certain abnormalities or aberrations that the lenses may have. And so unchecked, the image looks like this. When I check it, certain areas get a little brighter and it pops out just the tiniest bit. And let's see. So these are, sorry, these are classwork. So let's see. Try that. No. Oh, there it goes. So can you see the way that kind of pops in and out? And that's up to you if you want to correct. Sometimes you may think it looks better, and that's fine. It's your image. But I do recommend going in first thing and checking remove chromatic aberration. Chromatic means dealing with color, from the Greek chromos, meaning color. So that's that. Most of the work we'll do will be in this basic section. We haven't talked about white balance yet, so we won't deal with that quite yet. But this section also deals with all of these basic things: exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, and then texture, clarity, dehaze, vibrance, and saturation. The first thing I tend to look at is exposure. Is the image too light or too dark? And we talked about the bringing up the information about the image. And so we did that when we were in the library module. And now if you click on the letter I, information about the image comes up. So you can toggle through. So this is the first, and you set the information that you want to have there. But here's the information about the image: the shutter speed, the aperture, the lens, and so on, when it was made. And then I toggle through again, and I set it to show the exposure setting, and I had shot it at a -2/3 of a stop. And I can now see, actually, that was unnecessary. It's kind of dark, right? So the first thing that we can manipulate in the basic section here under white balance is exposure. And so I can go down. Obviously, that's way too dark, and I can go up. And it gives you 5 stops in either direction. If you set it to wherever and you want to get back to 0, you can double click on the slider. Let me get back in here 1 sec. Sorry. Sorry, just a moment. This is not helpful. My apologies. Sorry. Oh, my apologies. Okay. None of that. All right. Okay. Now, hopefully we're back. Okay. Can you see this again? Anybody? Can you see Lightroom again?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're obviously this is overexposed, and I'm at this exposure slider. If I don't want to get it, I have to fiddle with getting it exactly back. I can just double click on the slider, and it goes back to 0, and that's always true. But yeah, it's a little bright, so so I go through a series of things in order generally. And it's called a workflow. And so the first thing that I look at is after the color aberrations and the lens. I go in here and I look at exposure. I also look at white balance, which we haven't talked about yet, but white balance deals with the lighting situation in which you are photographing and getting different color casts. And we'll talk about that, I think, next week. But we have these options, and I can adjust how much yellow or blue there is in the image. Then the color tints going to green and magenta. So I also deal with that, but we'll talk about that a little later. So exposure. I look at the framing and think about if I want all of the information in the frame, or do I want to crop some of it. And if I want to crop, I can do a couple of things. But the first is this rectangle icon in the upper left of the right-hand panel. And if you put your cursor over it, it says crop overlay. And so that allows you to crop the image. If you are someone who prefers to use keystrokes, the letter R also will get you in there. And so when you do that, look at the image. Now there's a grid over the image, and my cursor has turned into this cropping icon, and I can come down and crop to whatever I want. Maybe I like that better. I can also move this around with the move tool with my cursor. I want to. So I can do that, and if I like it, then I can either hit the done button down here below on the right, just below the image. I can double click or click again on the tool icon, or I can just hit return on the keyboard, and that is now cropped. Now that's not written in stone. So again, Lightroom is a non-destructive interface, and so the actual image has not been altered at all. A set of rules has been written and applied to the image, but the image itself hasn't been changed. So if we go to the left and look at the history, now I have this whole history of stuff I've done, even though I haven't really changed that much. So at the bottom it says import, and if I put my cursor over the word import, if you look at the image in the navigator, that's what the image looked like to begin with. And as I move my cursor up over these, over the history, the navigator shows these things that I've done. Doesn't change it, just shows what it looked like at these different settings. Temperature, tint, 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 back to the crop, and finally back to my final command, or what I did. I can go back to those areas with my cursor. I can click on them. And if I start working from that point, so let's say go back to here, and I then decide to change the whites like that. Looks terrible, right? Now, if you look at the history, everything I did after temperature is gone. So I can panic and say, oh my God, oh no. Or I can just hit undo. So I can come up to edit, where up here at the top, and say undo white clipping. Or as you see, undo is Command Z, so you can do that. And when I do that, now my history comes back. But if I go back to a different point in the history and then start working, what I had done previously will disappear. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. But aside from that, the history remains intact. Okay, so I've cropped this. I adjusted the exposure. I've cropped it. And right now, I don't see any huge things that I want to change. But that's the first thing I go through. Now, the highlights are a little bright, so I have control over the highlights and shadows. And that affects those areas without doing an overall change in exposure, which we just did. So I'm thinking, well, you know what? The hat is a little bright. And so if I bring that down, it does bring a lot of other stuff down, which it shouldn't. But it's brought down that hat. And now I have a lot of detail here in what's called textured white that I didn't have before. So if I go back to 0, you can see it gets much lighter. So go back to that. And I came in close by double clicking, or actually, sorry, just clicking once. And I can go back to the full frame by clicking again. So I brought the highlights down, and now I'm thinking, oh, the shadows are looking a little dark also. Maybe I'll open those up. So below highlights, it says shadows, and I can open those up. You don't want to open them up too much because then it looks kind of weird. So if I open everything up, it looks a little washed out. And maybe I want to keep some difference so I can see that there is a shadow, but that's up to you. But now I've opened up the shadows some. The whites and blacks, that affects contrast. So I can make it bright again, but you see now I've lost the details in the highlights again. I can bring down the blacks, which makes the blacks more intense, but it can make the image darker overall. Now this image has so much brightness that it doesn't turn it black. But sometimes you may want the blacks blacker, you know, a little more punch. And maybe we'll intensify the whites a little bit more. So this area here, under the white balance settings, where it says tone and auto, these things control the exposure, areas of light and dark. Below that, it says presence. And that deals more with the actual kind of stuff that makes up the image. So texture. Now, most people don't really want a whole lot of texture. They want things. It's going to take a minute to do that. They want things more smooth, but you can adjust that to a certain extent by changing the texture. So there, it's smoothed it out. Now, look at that. He's like taken 15 years off his life right there. or I can, it's taking its time, increase that and make him look even more weathered, you know, and intensify the spots, you know, the age spots and freckly things on his face. But you can see in the opposite direction, this works really well for portraiture, you know, for smoothing things out, for, as I said, taking some years off a person. Clarity has the effect of making the image look sharper. And it does that by increasing not overall contrast in the frame, but local contrast between areas of light and dark. And so you can see where when I take away the clarity, when I subtract, it actually looks awful. So you want to be probably more judicious in your use of almost all of them. Dehaze also it makes things darker, crisper, it increases contrast, or it decreases contrast and makes things all hazy. Vibrance and saturation are related. So saturation is an increase across the board in terms of color intensity. So you see I've increased the saturation and everything is really, really intense. And this guy's skin now looks kind of like Donald Trump's face, you know. So it's very intense. And it's not to say that you shouldn't fool around with saturation. Now he looks washed out, right, in comparison. And if you completely decrease saturation, you remove all color and it becomes black and white. Vibrance is kind of like saturation, but with a brain. It analyzes the image and decides where you could use more color saturation, but it doesn't go crazy with it. So here I've increased it. Actually, this is 100, a plus 100, and it's certainly much more intense than it was. So let me show you a before and after. And in order to do that, if you use the letter Y, as in yes, it shows before and after. And to get out of that, just hit the letter Y again. So there I've greatly increased the vibrance, but it looks nothing like when I increase the saturation to 100%. So I would start with vibrance. And then if you want more intensity overall, go to saturation as well. That's my advice. But again, vibrance is like toned down saturation. It increases or decreases saturation, but in a more evaluative way rather than just across the board. Okay. Any questions on that? Anybody? No. Okay. Well, I'm going to go back to the library.
Sorry, I have one quick question.
Yes.
And I probably missed that. How did you select his face again?
So I went in and by clicking on his face once, you mean how did I bring it in close?
How did you tell, Lightroom to just adjust his face?
I didn't. Not yet. We haven't done. So it looks as if I just adjusted his face, but actually it adjusted the entire frame. I just came in close so that I could see the effect on the areas that I wanted affected. So for the hat,
Oh, I see.
I went in, let me get back into the develop module, sorry. I wanted to see the effect of changing the highlights. Let me get back there. On the hat, right?
Okay,
So,
but these changes are being applied to the whole
but they're
picture.
being applied to the whole picture.
Okay.
Exactly. And then I opened up the shadows, and you can see that here. But it actually is affecting the entire image. So either this time or next time, we'll go over how to do that in small areas. Okay. But
Okay.
yeah, but for right now, it's a good question. Thank you.
Mhm.
It's affecting the entire image, even though I had it zoomed in to one area. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. So sorry. Okay. Uh, yeah, so maybe I want it a little more vibrant and a little bit of clarity here. And you can see it's a high contrast image anyway, you know, it was done in bright sunlight. There are some bright colors there. It's rather patriotic, right? Red, white, and blue. Um,
It makes me miss the beach.
I know. I know. One day, right? One day we'll be back out. I hope. Um, yeah. So, specific areas. So if we go back up here above where it says basic, you see there are these icons. Right? So we looked at this one, which is the crop overlay tool, allowing us to crop the image. And these are other tools that can be used on the image. So let me do this one first. And first I have to find the images that I want, naturally. I don't have them right here, unfortunately, but I'm sorry again. Um, hmm. All right, let's see here. So sorry. I don't know why this is so slow. I hope that you guys hopefully have Lightroom there so that when I finally get back to this, you can work along with me. Okay. All right. Sorry. So I hope you guys can work along with me with this. But again, in the develop module, we're looking at these. Sorry, just finish importing that. Looking at these tools here. Can you guys see these images? Bright red eye.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so back into the develop module. So again, in the develop module, I can't see all of my images. Those appear in the library module, but I can see at the bottom, if I can move this stuff out of the way. I can see this little strip of images, and those are the images in the selected area that I've selected. So right now, these are the last imports. Lovely image, right? So red eye, a problem that that we often encounter, especially when photographing people with light eyes. So the light from the flash gets reflected back out, apparently. And so here, with these tools that are below the histogram, the third from the left is the red eye tool. And the red eye tool actually allows you to correct for human red eye and for pet eye. So red eye, we have it set for red eye at the moment. Then it says drag from the center of the eye or click to use current size. So we put the cursor in there, hopefully. All right. Okay, and that's way too big. So I can adjust the size by coming in smaller, like so, but that's not quite. All right. And so we adjust it until it covers the red. So there are controls, there are little sliders for the pupil size. And you can see I can increase that or decrease it. And also darken it or lighten it. So darken, lighten. Probably don't want to lighten it too much. But there, I've darkened that. And now I want to do the same for this eye. And that's it. Yep, that's it. Get rid of red eye. You can reset it, you can redo it. And then pet eye, come down here to find our pet. Just a minute. And so here we have the pet's glowing eyes, which I like personally, but some people don't. So just do this the same thing. And so you can increase it or decrease it by dragging that, or you can do pupil size by using the slider over here in the controls. Add catch light. So let me just do this one as well. The catch light is actually important in that you see this little reflective dot. When you don't have it, the eye looks kind of dead, Let me just do one thing here. It looks dead without that little reflection. So I'm going to put that back in, and then I'll activate this side just by clicking on it and add the catch light there as well. And you can see that it looks a lot more real, and not just like black holes in this poor dog's face. Okay. So again, that's pet eye, and here's a different one. And so and then the catch side, the catch light with and without. Okay, so that is the red eye. Now let get back here, and we'll do a couple more. So. Okay. So the tool, between the crop overlay and the red eye tool is this one that looks kind of like the male symbol, and it's called the spot removal tool. And so that's useful. Well, it's useful for a couple of different things. The first, and maybe I have a better image to work on here. That was strange. So let me just lighten this a bit so we can see it. And you can see this is a very grainy image, and we'll deal with that in a bit. But the spot removal tool goes in and lets you get rid of little areas that look like dust or scratches or just things that you don't want to be there. So let me just increase the... So I see over here there's this little black dot, or a couple of them, that I don't really like. So I can go in and remove them. So if I click on this tool, it opens up, it says brush, and then clone and heal. So you can do two things. You can copy an area and paste it somewhere else, or you can select this one spot and using the heal, you can just have it blend in with the surrounding area. Okay. So right now, I think I would like to just get rid of this little black dot and have it blend in. And so I have heal selected instead of clone, so one or the other. I can change the size of my my cursor in a couple of ways. If you're on a laptop, you can use the pad, just moving your fingers up and down. Notice that when I do that, this size slider in the controls moves up and down. So you can do that. You can also use the little wheel on your mouse, or you can use, if you prefer, the bracket tool, the bracket buttons or keys on the keyboard. So the left bracket makes it smaller, and the right bracket makes it larger. So in any of those ways, you can adjust the size of the cursor. So let's see, maybe I'll remove this. Now, when I click on that, another circle opens up. And as I move that around, it shows the information from that second area. Now, generally, especially when I'm trying to heal, just blend stuff in, I probably want to select an area as close to the original selection as possible. So maybe like that. And now that spot is gone. And I can do that as many times as I want. I can come in and get rid of this one. And this one. And again, so I want to move it around until the information is as close as possible to the surrounding area. So now those are gone. So if I look at it before, you can see these three spots, and after, they're gone. If I want to remember what it looked like I can make a snapshot of that rather than having to go back and remember where in my history that was. So right above the history section on the left, it says snapshots. And if I hit the plus sign, I can now make this snapshot. I can entitle it. So I could say spots and create it. And now I have under snapshots this snapshot that says spots. So I can go back to my work, and but I've made this picture or this snapshot so I can go back and see what it looked like before. So that's with the healing brush. Let's say I wanted to repeat something. So I'm going back out. Let's say this this thing on the wall. I'd like to make two of them. I'd like to repeat it. So I'm going to go into the tool and click on clone. Sorry, let me undo that. So again, I'll adjust the brush size and come in Now notice I have this black line around it. If I go back to the tool controls, there's this thing here called feather. And feathering controls the amount of selection on the edges. So if you feather at 100%, that means everything gets fuzzy on the edges. Oops. If you don't do any feathering, then you get a hard line around it. And usually you want a kind of halfway point. If you don't like what you've done, so I have this selection here. If you don't like it, you can just hit the delete key and it goes away. So let me do this. Or that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, so now I have copied it. If I don't want it right there, I can move that to wherever I want it. But to do that, you want to use the clone tool, so it copies it exactly. If you do the heel, then it will do its best to blend it in with the background. So you use heal for things that you want to heal, to go away, essentially. And you use the clone in order to actively copy things. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Maybe I wanted to copy those spots on her face and put them all over. You know, I could do that too. One other thing, I better close the door because there's some tool thing going on outside. Just a moment. Sorry. Okay, so when I have the cursor on the image, you can see the area I've worked on. But notice that when I move the cursor out of the image area and over to the panel, that disappears. You can control that. I like it to go away so I can see what the image looks like without the selection. But you don't have to do that. So if you go to the pull-down menu, you know, the pull-downs up at the top, under Tools, if you then go down to where it says Tool Overlay, I have it checked to Auto Show. But if I check it to Always Show, then it will not go away when I move the cursor over to the panels. Again, I prefer it to go away, so I put it on Auto Show. You can have it set so that it never shows. I definitely don't recommend that one because I really think you want to see it and see what you've done. Okay, so that is the spot removal tool. And again, if you like to use keystrokes, it's the letter Q to get into that. And when you're done, remember to get out of it. So again, either hit the Done button down here or click on the tool again or hit Return to get out of it. Otherwise, you know, and I forget all the time. I go in to do something and then I'm in a tool and I'm like, oh my God, what an idiot. Okay, so I'll get out of that. Out of that. And now I'm back into the, hang on. There. Now I am back into the basic area. Any questions on those tools? No? All good? Okay. So the next tool is the gradient, I think it's the gradient, graduated filter. And with that tool, you can control large kind of swaths of area. So let's say in this image, I'm looking at, there's quite a difference from the, the sky area and the foreground area. And I have a tool that allows me to go in and darken areas by, using a brush. But it's a large area here, and maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I'd like some way of affecting a much larger amount of space at one time. And so I can use the graduated filter. And this allows me to affect, again, a much greater area. So you can see I pulled it down from the top. I don't have to pull down from the top. It depends on the image. Again, if I don't like what I did, I can just click on the delete button and it goes away. I can come in from the side. I can adjust the angle like that. So right now I'll work on the upper area. And notice that if I start at the top, 2 lines come down. The first of which has a little hatch mark or circle in it, and then the second one is how I control how much area I've selected. And I'm going to do this because I want to show you what happens. From the top to the first line, whatever effect you've got going, and in this case I have exposure, so it's darker, will be at 100% from the top to this first line. And then from the middle line here, where the circle is, down to the bottom, there will be a fall off from 100% to 0. And let me just show you the area that is selected, or that's affected, I should say. So it's all turned red now. If I put my cursor over this little hatch mark, then I'll see this overlay will come and I can see the areas that are affected. If I move it, then that goes away. So again, from the top to this center hatch mark, whatever I've done is at 100%. And from the hatch mark down to the bottom, it falls off from 100% to 0. I can move the center hatch mark so that I have more or less affected area at 100%. And if I move the bottom, then I have less area that has a fall off. So I can compress those, really compress like so, or expand it. And then the areas that are selected, that is up here, I can control using the sliders here. So that's probably a little too dark. This is where it was. So maybe I want it a bit darker. But maybe I don't want the shadows so dark. So maybe I'll open those up more. Sometimes if I bring the highlights down more, I don't have to do as much overall darkening. Okay. So overall, yeah, that looks pretty good to me. But there are some things that look kind of weird. So for example, I now have this hard line here where my tool stopped. That looks pretty bad, right? So maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want to open some other things up here and even them out. But overall, I haven't had to go in and, deal with these tiny little areas of, trying to get them darker. One nice thing, many nice things about this is that I can do fine control. So if we go to the tool controls on the right, it says mask and then new, edit, brush. New means I can do a whole new gradient. So I can come up from the bottom, let's say, and maybe I want the bottom lighter. Maybe I want to open that up more. Like so. So I can add as many as I want. Now, I do have two, so I'll move this down. So if you look here, I have this one I just added, and the center is black. That means that it's active. But let's say I want to go back to my first gradient here, my first one. I need to move that so I can reach it. Come on. There. Maybe I want to deal with this one right now. Excuse me. And even these things out. So it says, again, here at the tools, mask, new, edit, and brush. I can click on brush. And now I can go in and paint this area with whatever it is I've done. Okay. Now I don't like what I just did, but anyway, I can even these things out a bit. If I don't like what I've done, notice that there's a plus sign in the cursor. If I hold down the Option key, that becomes a minus. And now I can undo what I just did. Maybe I don't want to do that much. I can go back and forth. If I know that I want to erase a whole lot, I can come down back over to the tools and go to the bottom below these sliders, and it says brush A, B, erase. Notice that A is highlighted, so that's the first area I worked with. And if I click on erase, now my brush becomes an erase. I don't have to hold down the Option tool. I can just come in and erase. And erase and erase and erase if I want to. And then if I mess up, if I go overboard, I can hold the Option key and then it becomes a plus. So that's the reverse. Okay. I can get out of the brush or the erase, sorry, by going back to these controls where it says brush and click on A. And now this whole entire area is active again. It's no longer a brush. Excuse me. Okay, and then if I want to work on the lower one, I click on that, and now the first area I worked on is, you can still see it, but it's grayed out, and the second is active. And I can move that around until I get that where I want. And so instead of, using a little tool and going in bit by bit, I can do big areas here. Now I don't necessarily like that line there again, so maybe I'll see what I can do with the brush here. And just lighten all of this up a bit, like so. And there I've gone over a bit, so maybe I want to get rid of that. I can, if I'm not sure exactly how much I've gone over, if I use the letter O for overlay, now it shows all of the area that's been affected. And if I hold the Option key, I can undo whatever I want in those areas. So maybe I don't want the side of the building that much lighter. Okay. To get rid of the overlay, just hit the O key again, the letter O. And now you can see the whole image. Again, if you bring the cursor back over the image, the tools show up again. And when you're done, you can click on that tool to get out of that and get back into the main control area. You can always go back in and readjust. So let's say I look at it and I liked it at first, but then I thought, maybe I don't like it as much. I can click on the tool again and come back in, and now you see these two gray dots. Those are the areas I worked on, and I can activate one or the other. So I've activated the lower part, and maybe I'm thinking, those shadows are still too dark. Maybe I will open them up a little bit, like that. And maybe the highlights are a little bright, so I'll bring those down. So again, I can go back in and work on anything I want again. It's not set in stone. I can always readjust. Okay. So now I'm looking at this and I think, there's a hard line there. I don't like that. So I'll go to the brush and just kind of lighten that up there. And I can go up into other areas as well if I want to. And brush it in, and so any of the controls I've used for the overall tool, I can use, or the effects with that tool, I can go in with the brush and do little areas. Maybe I just want to lighten that up a tiny bit, and just right in there, but nothing else. So I can do that with this brush. There's also another tool that we'll go over next time that is just the brush without the overall affected area of the graduated filter. Okay. Any questions? Any questions on that? No. Okay. So again, to get out of this, you can just click on the tool or click return, or there will be a button down here that says done. Okay. So maybe I now want to make a snapshot of what I've done thus far. So I can say maybe with the graduated filter, and hit create. And now under snapshots, I have graduated filter. What time is it? 3:43. Any questions? All good? Have I put you all to sleep? I hope not. So I will post these images onto Canvas if you want to work on them. Okay. Or certainly I hope you'll be working on your own images, but if you want to fiddle around with these, that's great. Sorry, I have to, you can't see it, but I have to keep moving this thing so that I can see. All right. Okay, so here is another image, and the next tool, which is the second from the right, sorry, is called the radial filter. And this allows you to select certain areas and work on them. Oops. So I get into the tool again by clicking on it, and you can see that the controls are a little bit different, and they've already been set. So exposure and contrast, you can see the sliders have been moved. If you don't want those settings, if you go here to the word effect and double click on it, everything gets zeroed out again. Okay, so again, let's say the exposure is way up and you don't want that, just double click on effect and it gets zeroed out. At the bottom of the tools that are specific for the, excuse me, the radial filter, it says color, and then below that it says feather, so you again can control the sharpness of the edge. And then it says invert. So pay attention, remember that for one moment. So I'm going to select an area, and I can move that by pulling on this center circle. I can change the shape by moving, you know, the circle itself up and down. I can rotate it. Okay. And then let me just do that. So notice I've gone way up in exposure, but it's not the selected area that got much lighter or that changed. It's the area around it. So what you need to do is click on invert. Check the box that says invert. And that will allow you to work on the area within the within the circle or the oblong or whatever you've made it, rather than without. Now, you can also work on without if that's what you want to do. But let's say I'll zero it out again, and I think it's a little too dark. Maybe I need to fine-tune my selected area a bit. Like so. And you can see I'm not getting it all, but I'm getting a decent amount. So I don't want it like that, but I would like that area a little lighter and brighter, you know. Maybe I want to open up the shadows in there a bit. There aren't that many, but I'll do that. I'll open up the shadows. And maybe bring down the highlights a bit. Let's see, do I need to do that? Not really. So when I bring up the highlights, notice that this area on the green foliage has gotten, it's turned almost white because I opened up the highlights. I don't necessarily want to do that. So, okay, so I've now made this area lighter, the reds. That's what I'm concerned with mostly, the reds. But I've missed a few areas. So again, as with the graduated filter, with the radial filter, I can make it a brush and come in and work on other areas. Maybe over here and lighten these reds. I don't have to do them all. I can also do other areas if I choose. Okay, so now let me just. So that's what I've worked on. And again, if I want to compare with what it looked like before, I can use the letter Y. You can see I've really made the red areas a lot brighter. Okay. And I can go in and do other areas. So let's say I want to make this area, just this area down here, or maybe this whole area, a little lighter. I can go up here to the tool controls again and click on New and make a new selection and move it to where to the areas I want affected. Like so, and it's okay if I go over the edge out of the frame. That doesn't matter. In fact, sometimes you may want to, so that you get the area selected that you want selected. And now I want this area lighter again. So, whoops, I forgot to invert it. So invert, and then just make that area lighter. Maybe not that light. And there are some other areas that are similar that I might like to affect. So again, I can make this a brush by going up here and clicking on brush. And now I can make these areas lighter. And I can go crazy, you know, I can keep going and going and going. And I find that that is something I do. I kind of get obsessive. And so I find it really helps after I've done that to go back to the image the next day or a couple of days later, because often I've found with me, what I think looks great one day looks really bad the next. And so again, it's really nice to be able to undo these things. And I don't have to undo it all, but I can undo parts of it. So here I've gone in and I've painted in these areas that I think should be lighter. Notice that in the selected area at the bottom in the gradient or the radial filter, because I made it lighter, now this this frond of green, of light green, is way too light. So I'll again, I'll go in with the minus, the erase tool, and undo that, just that area. So that looks much more under control, I think, than it had. But I've opened up all of these shadows in the foreground. Any questions? Anybody? So both of these tools, the graduated filter and the radial filter, are really good for affecting somewhat larger areas that you want changed without changing the entire image or the entire frame. There will, however, of course, be times when you don't want larger areas affected. You want to go in and adjust just small areas, and maybe a lot of small areas, but do different things. So in that case, our last and final tool up here is called the adjustment brush. And the adjustment brush lets us go in and select smaller or larger areas. So let me get out of this tool and let me see what my options are here. Let's try this one. Okay, so we have this image, and so overall it's okay. It's maybe a little bluish, but that's okay. I'll just open that up a bit there. But there are certain areas I can see I want to be lighter. I don't necessarily want the whole image to be that much lighter, maybe a little, but not too much, because I don't want the background to be too dark, too light. In fact, the background looks good much darker, but we'll deal with that later. But there are certain areas, especially in the flower, that I would like to be lighter. But the radial filter is a little too broad, it selects too much and leaves other areas out. And so I can do this, certainly, but I don't necessarily want this entire area affected. So I'll hit delete to get rid of that. And I'll go into the adjustment brush instead. And so the adjustment brush allows me to select specific areas and change them. So I want to come in a little closer. So what I've done here is go over to the navigator and click on one of these things. It's up to me where I want it. So, so I would like to make this area here lighter without making everything lighter. So I'm in the adjustment brush, and I'll go to exposure, and maybe I'll go way overboard so I can see the area I've selected. Okay. So I've opened that up, and if we go back to the slider, it now says 1.62, and that means I've opened it up by 1.62 stops. So it's essentially 1.5 stops brighter than the way I shot it. And I can go crazy, and it looks pretty bad, actually, when I do that. But I can fiddle around with it until I get to a place I think works. I can see the edges are not, they're a little, there are certain little areas that are not selected. And I can come in really close if I want to look at those. I can use the overlay tool But you know what? It doesn't work so well when it's red, does it? If the background is kind of reddish too. So if I go into Tools, the pull down menu here where it says Tools, and go down to Adjustment Mask Overlay, I can change the color. Red is, most people use red, but maybe in this case I'd like to use green so I can see the areas that have not been selected. And then I can go in and make sure that they are. Oops, look, I went over. So now I can use the Option key and erase that. If I want to move down, I can do two things. I can hold the Shift key, or sorry, the Space key, and whenever you do that, the cursor, whatever tool you're in, the cursor becomes the Move tool, and you can then move it around. You can also, if you go to the navigator, you can move that selected area around, and that's kind of nice, so you don't have to kind of hunt for things. You can see where you are. And then I'll go back in, maybe make the tool smaller, and get these details in here. I still have an edge, so let's see what it looks like when I fill that edge in. It looks terrible, right? So I can just undo what I did by hitting Command Z, which is always undo. And you do want to check periodically to see how things are looking. Now I've come in really close. You may not, when you look at it full frame, it looks fine. And if it looks, if when you come in really, really, really close, it's not quite right, it doesn't always matter, because you're not going to come in that close. But I can adjust the exposure again if I want to. Maybe open up some shadows, maybe not that much. Right. And if I think that what I've done here will work in other areas, then I can just apply that. But I can see that over here, that's just way too light. It won't work over there. Maybe here, yeah, that makes it too light also. So it's really just specific to that one area, what I did. And if I want to lighten other areas and not have those exact values, I'll go back to the tools, the controls for the tool here on the right, and click on New. And reduce the exposure. It doesn't matter the order in which you do that. But now I'm selecting, I'll put the overlay on this area here. And obviously if I go way up, it looks really bad. But maybe to about here at like 95, or let's say one stop. Let's see what that looks like at 1. So I've opened that up to one stop brighter. Let's see if that works up here. Yeah, that's kind of too bright too. Right? So I'll get rid of that. And let's see if it works here. Not bad, that's okay. And here, that makes it a little too bright maybe. So maybe we'll go in between and do yet another tool, or another brush here. Notice, by the way, I should have said this before, but notice that the cursor has 2 circles, the center and then the outer one, and that has to do with the feathering. So right now my feathering is at 81, which means there's more rather than less feathering, meaning the edges are a little softer. So let me just show you this. No. If I zero out the feathering and I select an area, you can see that the edges are really hard. Looks pretty bad in this situation anyway. But if I bring the feather up to 100, you can see the edges are much, much softer. And usually you want to go with more rather than less feathering, unless you're working with hard lines. But anyway, back to my selected area here. Maybe I'll come in closer so I can see it a little better. Maybe not that much. And I find, that it helps me when I'm selecting an area to maybe go beyond what I know I want in terms of light or dark. So just so I can see what I'm doing and see which areas are affected. And then go back in and adjust it to what I think works better. And so if I bring my cursor back, I can see now that I've worked on 3 separate areas. This one, which is active, this one here, and this area here. And I can work on, ooh, look at that. So now I see that I went over, let's click on that, in these areas with my brush, so I can use the minus key, or go in and make the brush an eraser down here, either way, to clean that up. Okay. And maybe I want this area a little bit darker, lighter, excuse me. So I can open that up. Now I'm not making a new one here, so whatever I did in the active area is what I'm doing there. I'm thinking, maybe I don't really want it that dark. So this one here is more subtle, so maybe I'll do that. And maybe lighten that up a little bit. And again, when I'm done with the tool, I'll click on it to get out of it. So here is my image, before and after. And so the things I changed, the overall white balance. So I made the image a little less blue overall. And I lightened up different areas of the flower at different, not rates, but by different amounts. Maybe I could make the stem a little bit lighter, not too much, because I don't want the bottom of the stem to be too bright, because then that'll pull my eyes down into the frame. But overall, I think that the flower is opened up more. I think it pulls our eyes into it more. I can now do a little more, if I want to, manipulations of the frame overall. Maybe I want to adjust clarity a little bit. Now, when you do a lot of clarity, notice it gets darker. And I don't necessarily want that. So I don't want to do a whole lot of clarity, but a bit. And vibrance makes the colors more intense, right? So I might do that a bit. If I open up the whites a little, it makes it a little punchier, you know. Now the highlights up here have gotten a little bright, so I can go back in and deal with those, and maybe we'll do that next time. But here is before and after, and as you can see, you can work on the image comparing it as you go if you want to. You can leave it in the before-after mode, I guess. Any questions? Anybody? No? Okay. Well, I hope that you will work on these things at home with either these images or your own images. Certainly, your own images. You know, as we go along. All good? Any questions about anything? Anything else?
Sita, so are the links uploaded or what's, sorry, I haven't checked lately, but are you uploading the links? I would like to review this material.
Yes, although I'm told they are again
The Zoom links?
there, but in the, and I'll go, when we're done, I'll go in and check this. If you go to, in Canvas, in the modules, the lowest, the bottom module should be Zoom meetings or words to that effect. Okay.
So all
so they
should
should be,
meetings.
I think there are a couple missing, but with the other class, although I had loaded them, they're not showing up. So I want to check your class as well. They may not be showing up, but I will make sure that they do if they're not there at the moment. Okay. So that you can review these.
Module for it.
Yes. So, you know, there's a module,
There's a module
and lenses and all that stuff. And then at the bottom, it should be Zoom meetings or words to that effect.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
Sorry.
So you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I went to upload my second assignment for depth of field, and I found the assignment page, but there's no submission button.
Okay, I'll check that as well. Let me write that down.
I get it.
I'm sorry, you're cutting out.
I also have a question.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi,
Right.
so I can't find the second assignment.
At all?
Yeah, I can't find the second assignment page in Canvas. No, I don't see it like I see assignment 1. It's usually shown in like to-do list on the corner right of your Canvas, but it's not on mine.
All right.
But I guess I can.
It's at the bottom of the Canvas page. If you click on assignments, it's only going to show what has due dates on it. But if you look at the very bottom of the main Canvas page, that's where all the links to those assignments are.
That's right.
Oh, I see. Also, for assignment 1, were we supposed to email it or submit it via Canvas? Because I emailed, but I never got a response back verifying that it was submitted.
Let me check my emails then. But I would prefer that you submit to Canvas, because then it's on Canvas, so that we can look at it, you know, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, but I'll check my
Yeah,
emails.
I sent 2 emails, but yeah, if you can get back to me.
All right, I will check that definitely. But if you have a chance, go ahead and submit it to Canvas. Okay. Hello? Okay.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. Anyone
I
else?
have one more question.
Yes?
I just want to know when assignment 2 is due.
What did I tell you guys? So that's depth of field. Shoot. Well, let's say Friday. How's that? All right. Get it in by Friday, then we can talk about both assignments on Monday. All right.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll put that all up. Okay. Any other questions, comments, issues? Anybody? No? Well, in that case, have a delightful week and weekend. Make lots of images and stay safe and healthy. All right. Okay. Take care. Bye.